Hello everyone, this video is made by a group of marine geoscience students from University of Bremen for Master's Conference, and it's about the Ipcc report, so we are going to interview some of the experts. Stay with us.
Thank you for having us again.
No problem.
I would like to ask, have you perceived any important changes because of the work of Ipcc over the past years?
Yes. One thing is I'm quite sure that, for example, the Paris Agreement wouldn't exist without the Ipcc. I think Ipcc is very important in communicating the problem, both to the public but also to policymakers. And while the advances seem to be so slow, I'm still convinced that they are only possible because of the work of Ipcc. And that is the large international level, but then also if you think about EU regulations for car emissions. I think that Ipcc is an important channel for bundling that information so that people realize how big the problem is and start taking actions.
My first question is, what have you thought about yourself, like your personal experiences and personal lifestyle while reading the Ipcc report?
When I first read the summary publication of the Ipcc report and the difference between the 1.5 and 2 degree goals, I was really astonished about the difference scientists found it would make. And some of the differences are right in my field of science, like the field, the fate of the coral reefs, the fate of the sea ice cover in Antarctica. And so, first of all, I was thinking about my role as a scientist and how I could improve, how I could be a better communicator, how I could better fight for the goals that we should have to look forward to a better future. That was the first reaction. So I wanted more science, different science. I talked to some scientists in my institute. Can we not be more active in doing research on the difference between 1.5 and 2 degree goals? Because some key gaps were identified, like not knowing what the difference it makes for the glacial melt and ice streams and the whole behavior of the cryosphere. And so that was my first reaction. And for myself, I also thought of some things I could do better. And I registered on the website of the Umweltbundesamt, so our national lab for environmental problems. They offer a service where you can register your entire CO2 footprint, and then you can also register for Atmosphere, a project where you can pay some taxes to provide negative emissions for a better balance of carbon.
Okay. Have you drawn any consequences for your personal lifestyle after that, like less flights, reducing plastic waste, buying regional food?
Yeah, so already in my behavior, even before, I'm concerned with my footprint. Of course, again, as a director of an institute and a leader of expeditions, I often have to fly. But luckily, my institute, the AVI, we have received the funds to pay off for all workers on and carbon neutralize the travel budget. So it is not sufficient, these measures, to really change the fate of all of us. So we need to do more. So in my personal behavior, as I said, I'm trying to carbon neutralize my entire behavior, and I'm also looking after solutions that we can have for travel. Personal solutions include, of course, trying to purchase not too many fruits or food that come from far away. And I try to never waste any food, which is an important contribution. I don't eat a lot of meat, and I looked up that from all of the types of meat, the beef is a bigger problem on Earth, so I'm also trying to be conscious with that. Yeah.
Have you changed your working style after the report or work for the Ipcc? Less printing, less use of plastic in labs, and is that possible? And no capsule coffee as well.
So I at home I don't use any capsule of coffees, but at the job, but I have already organic ones. So you can, of course, many of the materials we use, you can replace them by other materials. But when it comes to my work, how I change my work, it's really about the way I do science and the way I do communication. And after I read the report, I decided to be more political. So in my science, to ask the right questions, and when I communicate with the public, to be very blunt and very clear about the goals that we have, the path we're on, and how to change it. And since then, I think I already managed some of this. So I have a lot of. I got the environmental prize of Germany, so that would also help being more demanded as a communicator. And I think I became much more political, facing the problems that we'll run into if we don't change our behavior.
Okay. Have you changed your working style after the report or work of the Ipcc, like less printing, less use of plastic in labs, and is that possible?
I mean, to some degree, yes. Again, I would say not directly as a consequence of Ipcc, but rather as a consequence of understanding the principal problem, right? So you mentioned printing, for example. When I was doing my PhD, I still had always a stack of papers on my table. If you check now, I don't have that anymore. Sometimes I realize that it's actually a little bit of a drawback. I realize that it's easier for me to read if it's on paper than on screen. I'm less focused when I'm reading it on screen, but still I'm trying to avoid it. Then I mentioned video conferences. Typically, I would say I have 2 or 3 video conferences per week. Now, I don't think that each of them replaces traveling somewhere, right? Because I wouldn't be traveling to 2 or 3 different meetings in a week. But it's becoming more and more common to have those things and to take decisions, for example, in bigger projects, to say, well, let's not meet in person, let's do this through video conferences. And I think that those decisions, they are to some degree shaped by sort of the common understanding in the scientific community that we can do our part as well to contribute to reducing CO2 emissions.
Okay. And if you get the chance to give the public a good advice on how to achieve the goals of the Ipcc, which one would that be?
I think one thing is personal decisions, right? Do I really need to take the car? You know, it's raining and stormy outside, but it won't kill me, right? So I can still take the bike. And I think those personal decisions are important because they keep you alert to those things. You have to think about what you can do. But I think it's also actually quite limited what you can achieve with those personal decisions. Because you make those decisions not in a void, right? You're living in a certain structure, in a certain society with certain technological possibilities, and others aren't around. And so basically, I think that part of the personal responsibility is participating in the democratic process, right? For example, sometimes I take the decision to take a car. I know that it would be better to avoid it, but you know, in the different things I consider, in the end, I decide to do it. Obviously, I would prefer to use an electric car, for example, but I don't have access to that. And the reason why I don't have access is less of my personal decision, but rather the larger structure that we live in. And this is something that we can change through societal decisions, through elections, essentially. And I think electric cars are a good example for that, because I just recently read in Norway almost half of the new cars that are being registered are electric or hybrid cars. And Norwegians are living on the same planet as us, right? It's about the political decisions that are being made, where you actually put focus and emphasis and so on. And I think there's a certain danger concerning climate change that too much pressure is put onto individuals and individual responsibility, right? So there's also a common responsibility, and I don't think we can demand of each and every one of us to live carbon neutral if the surroundings are as they are. So we also need to work on changing the surroundings.
What are your thoughts on alternative energies and alternative approaches to fight global warming? For example, the Ocean Cleanup Project and electric cars or renewable energies?
Well, I mean, the Ocean Cleanup project I don't think has much to do with climate change actually, right? I mean, I mean it's an important problem as well, but yeah, I mean alternative energies, basically renewable energies. I think it's the natural way to solve the problem. I'm really not an expert on renewable energies and so on, right? So my impressions here are somewhat subjective and sort of based on my personal view. But that impression is, my personal impression is that it's not a technological problem, becoming an almost carbon neutral society. It's rather a political problem, really. If you look at how fast renewables have been developing, and you look at projections, for example, you can compare this with projections, and you can see that over the past years it has always been going faster than it was projected. And that makes me a little bit optimistic, right? That there's quite a bit of change possible. But then again, you have to think about sort of the societal boundary conditions. Right, and then you see that, for example, in Germany, brown coal. I don't think it's called brown coal. Does anyone know? It's
lignite coal, something like that. Lignite, I think.
Oh, you're a geoscientist. You should know. Lignite coal is still being used quite a lot, even though people are aware of the problems. The same also with standard black coal, and. I mean, I can understand where the difficulties are coming from, right? At the moment, it's also about jobs, right? You don't want to shut it down from now to tomorrow because of the people who have jobs there. But then again, we knew about the problem 20 years ago, right? And we could have initiated a process 20 years ago. So I think what is really keeping us back is not technology. I think it would be good to invest more into technology and maybe try to find out better ways of maybe even removing CO2 from the atmosphere. By now we will need it, right? We won't be able to keep this 1.5 degree goal if we don't eventually remove CO2 from the atmosphere. So I think it's good to invest in that, but it's also about just facilitating the change. It's not just technology. A lot about this is. I think I should start new because
don't worry.
It's very unstructured
Sorry.
reply.
We can talk more about, for example, the electric power cars in this question.
Yes. What was actually the question?
The question was, what are your thoughts on alternative approaches to fight global warming?
Yes.
So the Ocean Cleanup Project, I can start it up,
yeah.
and then we can just focus on electric cars and on the transition to renewable energies.
Electric cars make a lot of sense if you use the right energy to charge them, right? So I guess that actually at the moment, if you take the standard energy mix of Germany and you charge an electric car, it's still going to be better than using a fossil fuel-based car. But again, you have to keep that in mind, right? That the electricity also comes from somewhere, and this somewhere at the moment includes quite a bit of fossil fuels. But then again, this is something that can change with renewables, and electric cars actually might be a way of making this easier, right? They can store quite a bit of energy, and so on a windy day when there is maybe too much energy in the networks, it could go into the electric cars. It's just sometimes it's a bit more complicated than you think at the first view. But yes, definitely electric cars are a way forward.
Because it's very good to know, or the people to know that not only we need the electric cars, but also the power who powers them.
Yes.
And where
exactly.
does this
Where
energy
does it
come from? If it comes from fossil fuels, we're not doing much, but if they come from
Yeah.
renewable energies,
Yeah.
then it's a
And I think
big-
something else that people need to keep in mind is that there's no free ride, in a sense. If we decide as a society to change our entire infrastructure so that everything is based on electricity, which is now based on fossil fuels, it will also come at an environmental price. So, for example, if you build an electric car, you need the batteries, you need the motors for that, and to build those things, you need certain minerals, right? So you need to think about increasing mining, not for fossil fuels, but for other kinds of minerals. Some countries are trying to avoid CO2 emissions by increasing nuclear power. Germany is trying to avoid that, but I can understand how countries say, okay, this is more important for us at the moment, reducing CO2 emissions, than reducing nuclear power. Right? So I think as we start to walk more towards a carbon-free future, we will meet those challenges increasingly, right? And more often that we realize, okay, you can't have what is it called? You can't eat your cake and have it too, right? So it's not a free ride. There will be other downsides, and we need to be aware of that. I think we can work with this, and we should still be doing that. You know, that's my personal opinion. But there will be problems along the way.
Hello, I'm with Professor Kuchera, the expert of Ipcc report, and he's going to say something about himself.
Yes, hello, my name is Michal Kuchera. I'm a professor of micropaleontology and paleoceanography. And in my research career, I've been working on reconstructions of past climates using microfossils. And in this capacity, I came into contact with Ipcc and the research that is dealing with predicting and assessing of the future climate depending on the various emission scenarios.
Okay, question number 1. What have you thought about yourself, like your personal experiences or personal lifestyle, while reading the Ipcc report?
I've been reading Ipcc reports for 30 years. They come in regular intervals, and their main message has never changed. It is quite clear that the man-made activities, the emission of greenhouse gases, are changing the climate of the Earth. And so the question is, what can you do as an individual, or how can you behave as an individual? I follow the philosophy that it is very hard to change something by changing the behavior of an individual. In this field, what one needs is a concerted political and international action. I think that is the only way that we can really combat the effects of the greenhouse gas emissions. So, as an individual, I cannot say what I have done or what has changed in particular, but I'm trying to influence the generations of people or the public through my professional position as a researcher and as a teacher, as a mentor, and raise the awareness of the problem, what the consequences are. And in my opinion, it is the job of the decision makers and the politicians to take measures that will be really effective.
Okay, Professor Kuchera, if you get a chance to give a public a good advice about on how to achieve the goals of the Ipcc report, what would that be?
Read the election programs of the different parties and select a political party that you think is going to make a change in the future. Because as I said before, I think on an individual level it is very hard to make a difference, but on the political level and for a state or internationally there is a chance to make a difference. So read these policy programs of the different parties, including for the European elections or for the national elections, and judge by yourself who is going to deliver.
It's for Masters Conference and it's about the ICCP report, so we are...